Hello, this lecture will be intended for data collection, organization, and presentation. In this lesson, we'll be discussing the different ways to collect, organize, and present data so that it can easily understood by the reader. Data collection, organization, and presentation are important processes that you must learn in order to interpret the data correctly. Furthermore, you will be learning how to construct frequency distribution, and stem and leaf display, among others. In data collection, the goal of every statistical study is to collect information which will be used in making decisions. Decision made from the result of any statistical study is only as good as the processes used to obtain the information. If the process is flawed, then the resulting decision is also questionable. And there are several ways or methods to collect data. One is through survey. Survey is an investigation of one or more characteristic of a population. Most often, surveys are done by asking questions either through self-administered questionnaires or personal interviews. Nowadays, in the advent of technology, online survey becomes prevalent. And there are two kinds of survey. One is census, in which every unit in the population are considered. And another one is the sample survey. In the sample survey, only part of the population is needed. So again, in census, every entity, every unit in that population is included. However, in sample survey, only part of the population is needed. And there are some advantages of sample survey. One, speed and timeliness. Data collected on the sample can be gathered faster while ensuring uniformity of data gathering procedure. Another is economy. Economy in data gathering, the analyses are cheaper compared to census. And another advantage is the quality and accuracy. When properly conducted, a sample survey usually yield more accurate results since a small, highly skilled group of enumerators are likely to make fewer errors in the collection and handling of data than large census numbers would. And the next is feasibility. In feasibility for a large population, it is difficult or sometimes impossible to gather all the data from a population. It is more doable to gather data from a sample compared to a population. And then another method of data collection is through observation. In observation, it makes possible the recording of behavior, but only at the time of occurrence. It is also employed when the subject cannot talk or write. In doing observation, the researcher make use of their senses and observe the condition in the natural state rather than communicating with their respondent. Another method of data collection is through existing records. In existing records, data from published materials like reports, personal files, and historical records will be utilized. Another method is the simulation. Simulation is the use of mathematical or physical model to reproduce the condition of the situation or process. Simulation allow you to study situations that are impractical or even dangerous to create in real life. And another method is the experiment. In performing an experiment, a treatment is applied to part of a population and responses are observed. Data are obtained under controlled conditions. And there are two types of data. One is primary and another one is secondary. In primary data, these data are collected directly from the objects of the study. These subject or objects may be people, experimental animal, or the environment. Because the data are collected by the individual who will utilize the data, the individual can then very precisely collect the information that he wants. He can specify the operational definition used and can eliminate or at least monitor and record the extraneous influences on the data as they are gathered. The collection of primary data, however, is costly and time-consuming compared to secondary data. And these are some advantages of our primary data. Data collected for the first time, hence original in character. Another advantage, the information collected is accurate. And third, some confidential information can be tactfully collected from the informant. If there are advantages, there are also disadvantages. One disadvantage of primary data is that methods of primary data collection are expensive and time-consuming. Second, the personal prejudice and bias of the investigator and enumerator can destroy the purpose of the survey. And the data may not be reliable if collected carelessly. In secondary data, these are previously collected data that are found in publication of both government and non-government institutions, research papers, books, periodicals, pamphlets, computer files, microfilms, or the internet. Secondary data are useful in that they feel a need for a specific reference on some point. They act as reference benchmark against which other findings may be tested. They can provide background material on what has already been done, thereby providing direction on what further needs be done. And last, they can be used as a basis for a research study as in validating a research methodology or a mathematical model. The advantage of secondary data. Secondary data are collected quickly and cheaply. Second, when official statistics are collected, these are the most reliable and acceptable by other agencies. Disadvantages: secondary data may not meet one's specific needs. Two, it is difficult in assessing the accuracy of the information. Oftentimes, definition and units of measurement will be different, and the timeliness of the data is often questionable. Another is classification of data. There are several ways to classify data. One, geographical classification. So in geographical classification, the data are classified according to its location. This is one of the examples of geographical classification. So we have here our data is about COVID-19 confirmed cases, and the countries are the ASEAN countries. We have Singapore, Brunei, Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia, Myanmar, Vietnam, and Laos. So this is one way, or this is one example of geographical classification of data. Another classification could be chronological. Chronological means a sequence of a series of events or time. So we have here year 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. And then our data are the number of linkages partners. So 2014, there are 15 linkages. In 2015, there are 73. In 2016, there are 89. And 2017, 52. And last 2018, there are 109 linkages. Another classification of data is qualitative, not quantitative. So this is another classification of data could be qualitative. And in qualitative classification of data, we can classify them according to simple classification, in which we are only classifying our respondents or people under consideration at once. So we are classifying our respondents at once. For example, if we have residents, we are only classifying them according to their sex as to male or female. In another classification, the manifold classification, we are classifying our residents in more than, or we are classifying our residents more than once. For example, if we classify them according to sex as to male and female, then male can be classified again, either they are literate or illiterate. The same with as to female. We can classify them according either they are literate or illiterate. So this is classifying our respondents more than once. Another classification of data is by means of quantitative classification. So in quantitative classification, we are classifying them according to a quantitative description or quantitative group. Like for example, if our data is quantitative nature, we can classify them quantitatively. Like for example, height. So height is a quantitative data. Therefore, we can classify our data by means of height, because height is a quantitative data. Okay, next, we will be discussing the data presentation. So in data presentation, there are several ways to present data. So first, we have the textual form, or the textual presentation of data. So in textual presentation of data, we are presenting the data in paragraph form. So this is an example of paragraph presentation of data. This is an article from the internet. So the new positives increased the region's cumulative total of 6,884 with 3,194 active cases. Bacolod City still lodged the highest number of new cases with 106, while Negros Occidental has 53. Iloilo City has 45, Iloilo Province 25, Capiz 20, Aklan has 2 and 1 each in Antique and Guimaras. Local cases totaled 238, of whom 11 are locally stranded individuals or LSIs. 2 are returning overseas Filipinos, and another 2 are authorized persons outside the residence. So this is an example of textual presentation of data. We are presenting the data in paragraph form or in textual form. Another way to present data is using tables, the tabular form. So in tabular form of data presentation is characterized by columns and rows. So if the data is presented in terms of rows and columns, therefore, we are presenting the data in the tabular form. And we have different names for table. We have table heading, the caption or box head, the stub, and then the body. So this is an example of tabular presentation of data. Another way to present data is through graphs or graphical form. There are several types of graphs. We have the line graph. This is the example of line graph, the bar graph, the pie graph, pictograph, and then if we have quantitative data, we can present them by means of stem and leaf display. So this is an example of our data. And if we are going to present this data in, if we are going to present this data in the form of stem and leaf diagram, first we can arrange first our data either ascending or descending. So if it is arranged, so the first column is the stem, and then the second column is the leaf of our data. For example, we have first entry 2, and then 2 is written as 02. And then the last number, the highest number, is 30. And then we write 30 as 3 as the stem and 0 as the leaf. So this is how stem and leaf display diagram is created. Aside from stem and leaf display, we can also create frequency distribution. Before we can discuss further, the frequency distribution is very important for us to define the different terms. Like, for example, class intervals. So this is the range within every interval. So that is the class interval. The end numbers 20 and 29 are called class limits. 20 is called the lower limit, and then 29 is called the upper limit. A class interval without an upper-lower class limit is called open-ended class intervals. Open class intervals usually are continuous variables. And then we have also terms like class boundaries, and class boundaries are also called as true limits. For example, we have lower class boundary that is also called as true lower limit, and then upper class boundaries are called a true upper limit. We have also class size, in which it is only the numerical difference between the upper and lower class boundaries. And then midpoint midpoint between upper and lower class limits can be uh, identified by adding the lower limit and the upper limit and then divide the sum by 2, and that will be the midpoint. The number of observations falling in a particular class interval is called the class frequency. This is oftentimes denoted as F. And we have guidelines in the construction of frequency distribution. So we have first determine the range. The range is the difference between the highest and the lowest value. Second, solve the number of classes or class intervals K. The formula can be used. One, by using the 2k raised to n, or 2 raised to k is greater than or equal to n. N is the sample size. And then we have also the Sturge formula. The Sturge formula is defined as k is equal to 1 plus 3.3322 log of n. So those are the three approaches in finding the k or selecting the value of k. And then third, determine the class size I. So I is equal to the range divided by k. And then fourth, determine and enumerate classes. So that is 4. And then 5, count the number of observations that falls in each of the class intervals. So for example, we have here a set of our data. Construct a frequency distribution of the orders received of a computer company in 40 days. So there are 40 observations. First, determine the range. So since this data is already arranged, the lowest score or lowest entry is 10 and the highest entry is 38. So highest score minus lowest score, that is 38 minus 10, and that is 28. So the range is 28. Next, solve for the number of classes or class intervals k. So there are two approaches. In this case, k is equal to 6. And I, solve for I or determine the class size. I is equal to range divided by k. So we found out that I is equal to 5. Then determine and enumerate the classes. So there are series of steps. First, construct a table containing columns such as class intervals, tally, and frequency. And then list the lower limits of the class steps. Start with the lower limit of the lowest class step and add I to obtain the lower limit of the next class step. And then determine the upper limits of all the class steps. Start with the lowest class step. So we have here 14, then add I going upward. So 14 in this case, 14 plus 5, that is 19, plus 5, that is 24, so forth and so on. And then last, enumerate or count the number of observations that fall in each of the class interval. And then that's the tally. And then the last column is the frequency. So frequency, we construct frequency by counting the tally. Okay, another graphical presentation is through frequency polygon. So frequency polygon is characterized by class mark in the horizontal axis, and then the vertical axis are the frequencies of your data. And then histogram. Histogram is somewhat like bar graph, in which the class marks are the horizontal axis, and then the vertical axis is the frequency. And then the ogive. The ogive is the graph of our cumulative frequency. So this is the ogive, and that's it. So thank you for listening.